Hello and welcome. This is James from the DSO Imager channel. Tonight we're going to take a close-up look at the Orion Nebula. Now, I come back to M42 every year. In fact, the very first astrophotography image I took ever was a picture of M42, the Orion Nebula. And I actually have it right here. The story behind this picture, just real briefly, it was November 2016. I was taking an astronomy class at a local community college, and they had a few 11-inch telescopes, Celestron, CPC 1100s in fact, on the roof of one of their buildings. And I brought in a Nikon D3100 and I hooked it up just to see if I could get color, right? Because I didn't know about astrophotography at the time, and I know that when looking at objects through an eyepiece with our own eyes, you're not seeing any color. So I was just curious if a long exposure with a DSLR would pull color, and I shot this. I don't remember how long the exposure was. It was probably 30 seconds if I recall. But yeah, that the color was amazing, and this is the picture that started it all. Now, I've taken many shots of Orion since then. Recently, I finished up a picture with the 65 PHQ little refractor, and I posted that video a couple weeks ago on my channel. But I've never done a broadband shot of Orion with my 8-inch edge. Now, the Orion Nebula is a very interesting target in the sense that it's a great target for beginners because it's very bright and it's easy to find. However, it's really an expert's target because it's so bright. The dynamic range is really something on this target, and in many ways I actually think it's not a good beginner target because some of the guidelines or standard rules that you use in astrophotography don't really apply to M42 because M42 is so bright. Now, my initial goal with this image was to kind of do a version of this, only applying my equipment and all the skills that I've learned over the past few years. And so my focus was on the trapezium. And because of that, I wasn't too worried about catching detail, all the fainter stuff. And I stuck with very short subs. I did some test shots and I was able to determine that 60-second exposures with my edge at f7 worked out fine for red and green. However, 60-second subs on the blue channel was actually blowing out some of the stars and a little bit of the trapezium. And so for blue, I shot 45 seconds. Now, one technique that you can use in Pixinsight is to make an HDR image, and what you do is you do really short subs, like I have here for the trapezium, and then you do longer subs to really pull out more detail on the fainter regions. And then you can use this tool here, HDR Composition, and basically what it does is the parts of the longer sub image that's blown out, it replaces that data with the data from the shorter subs, so you get a nice high dynamic range image. But again, since I wasn't really focused on doing that this time around, I just stuck with these short subs. Incidentally, if you are interested in doing an HDR, a little over a year ago I did put out a video walking you through that process. So I'll drop a link in the description field for anyone that wants to do that. But I'll just put a word of caution on there. You don't need to go overboard with it. There's no reason to do like 5-second subs, 30-second subs, a minute subs, 2-minute subs. You really don't need to do that. All we're really worried about is if your core is blown out, then you just need subs that are short enough to replace that data. So if I wanted to do, say, 3-minute subs, then I could do that and then do this 45-second sub on blue for the blue channel. The other thing about keeping the subs really short is that your tracking is going to be, well, it's not going to be better, but you're going to have less blur due to tracking problems. Now, I'm using a Skywatcher EQ6, and it handles my Edge 8 pretty well. With good seeing, it'll track below the image scale, but that's with good seeing. And lately, most nights have been kind of meh seeing. And so I'm guiding typically a little bit above the image scale of 0.67. So if I'm guiding around 0.8 art with a total RMS error of 0.8, those subs are still acceptable. But once it gets up closer to 1 second, it's really too soft anyway. And so keeping the subs short, my hope was also to help keep things crisp in the trapezium here. Alright, so there's our blue, and there's our red, and let me get green up here, and there's green. Now the other interesting thing that you may notice is that I did not use luminance. And again, this target is so bright, I just didn't think it was necessary to bother with luminance. I mean, the subs would have had to have been like 10 seconds long or something like that to keep from blowing out the core. And, you know, honestly, just collecting hundreds of 10-second subs, it's not fun. The efficiency on capturing the data is really low because of all the settle time and the download time and the amount of space it takes up because you're now downloading a ton of subs. So I just decided to skip luminance on this target altogether and just stick with RGB. Alrighty, so I did run dynamic background extraction against each channel, so you can see those here. And then I combined them using the LRGB Combination tool, and I ended up with this. Now, I did run dynamic background extraction a second time, but after I did the combination. It's a technique I do sometimes. Sometimes the light pollution gradients are really bad, and it seems to help giving it 2 rounds. I'll do maybe a division on the individual channels, and then a subtraction on the combined image. And so that got me this here. Next I ran Star Exterminator, so you can see the difference in the stars mostly. And it definitely helped with some of the detail. If we look over here, yeah, it did a pretty nice job. It was mostly for the stars though. Oh, I think it does a nice job in the dust. Yeah, huge difference here. Oh, and before I forget, I did run color calibration on this before running dynamic background extraction. Now, since then, I've changed up the order on that, and I now run color calibration after dynamic background extraction. And I do that primarily because dynamic background extraction can impact the colors. Now, on this particular target, it really didn't make much of a difference, and so there was no reason for me to go back and do it over again. But just, you know, just take that as a little tip. Alright, and so I cloned it, and next step was to remove the stars using Star Exterminator. And then next I stretched, and for stretching I'm just using the Easy Processing Suite Soft Stretch. And now I do a lot of curves work, and I use a lot of masks. So you can see there's already a mask on there. And what I'm wanting to do is kind of brighten these darker areas up. Now maybe this would not be necessary if I had taken longer subs and did an HDR image, but this worked out fine. So I'll just step through all the different steps. So you can see how it's lightened up the edge there. Yep, still working. Very subtle changes. And now I'm boosting the contrast. So what you can see that's going on here is that I'm trying to keep this area dark while bringing the lightness up here. So it's just increasing the contrast. Alright, so now I've got focused my attention on this bright area. And what I've done here is I've just made various masks of different sizes. And I pretty much just stepped down the brightness. This area is not blown out. It looks blown out, but it's just really a matter of pulling back on curves. And so that's what you're seeing here. And the trick here is the mask's got to be such so that you don't, so that the mask usage doesn't appear obvious. Otherwise, I mean, even here you see like you can almost tell like this area is a little bit too dark. So you just got to be real creative with mask usage. The goal is that this should not look artificially darker. It should transition pretty smooth. Now, on a lot of my M42 shots, I actually kind of like this area really bright. But remember, my goal from the beginning was actually to focus on the trapezium. And the rest of this was a secondary concern. So I really wanted to dial this back and reveal what we have in there. Now let's take a look at the mask. So you see I'm doing some more work on here, but this mask, I wanted to give some attention here because this area here was blown out so much that you really weren't even seeing much of the detail, and a lot of the color wasn't there. So it definitely needed some specific attention. And of course, when I'm doing this work on this area, I'm not wanting to impact the core because I got the core close to where I wanted it, at least from a signal side. Now I'm inverting here, and what kind of mask do we have on? So what's going on here is that I felt like the core here was too purple. And the reason it's so purple is because we pulled back on curves so much. And when you do that, it like concentrates the color. So there's really too much color in here, and there's just too much purple. And the easiest way that I know to dial back purple is to, well, I inverted it and then created a color mask, and we're going to subtract some green. So, I mean, there you go. It's not a huge difference, but I basically moved it from purple to more of a pink, which kind of matches the rest of the color here better. And you can see I'm still working on colors. Brightening this area out with this mask, protecting this so that I'm not, blowing the core out again. So yeah, there's a lot to keep track of when you do work on M42. Alright, so I got to this stage, and this is pretty much, we can call this version 1. So I added the stars back on it, and that gave us this. And so this was the first version of this shot. And then I kind of went into like a 24-hour hold period. Now you can see I did a little bit more work on it. I took it into Photoshop, and right here, let's see what happened here. I was doing some work. So I wasn't totally satisfied with how the core looked. I felt it was still a little bit too purple. And I'm realizing that all this dark purple stuff, this is actually dust. So it should be this color, not purple. And so I decided that I need to go back and work on the core some more. And so I'm doing a combination of dialing back. I did a couple funny things here. I actually added green. Why would we add green? Well, because purple is the inverse of green. So I wanted to dial back on the purple, and there's no purple curve or anything that I can adjust. Maybe in Photoshop you could use a hue saturation and hit the magenta slider. But anyway, I added a little bit of green while also conversely dialing back the saturation. And that's what allowed the dust color to come out. And so yeah, this, to me, this color here looks a lot more natural than what I was getting before with the purple. Done. So here's another copy, right? Another clone. Did some more tweaking here. We got a mask on there, and so what I wanted to do was two things. One, I'm not sure how it happened, but this part up here got too purple, and I wanted it to closer match this. And so I did work on a mask. Well, actually, I'm getting ahead myself. So you see this change here? This is using the histogram equalization. Histogram equalization is a really powerful tool, and it is very easy to overcook your images. And there's lots of shots of Orion out there that just look really overcooked. And I think what happened is either too much sharpening was applied or too much histogram equalization was used, and it applied it to the whole image. What I was trying to do is get a little bit more of a contrast and kind of a 3D look on these outer blue arms. And so using the mask to protect the rest of the image, I hit it with a very mild dose of that, and I think that did a really good job. Now I do address this color. We'll probably get to that. Yeah, so there, you can see that. Let's see what the mask is. Yeah. So just dialing back some of the purple here to get this color closer to what we have over here. Inverting to get more of that purple out, and now it's a really nice match for the rest of it. Doing a little bit of work, a little bit more work on there. And here. So now this is a step that I decided to do some histogram equalization in here, and it almost feels a little too overcooked for me. Like, if you zoom in, it looks great. But if you zoom out, you know, I don't know. I feel like this is a little overcooked, and this is an area where I ended up leaving it like this, but I still have some lingering doubts that applying this was a good idea on this part. The bottom line is, though, adding the stars back kind of minimize that overcooked look. But yeah, drop a note in the comments on your opinion on this. Which looks better, this or that? Yeah. Maybe I should have tried to split the difference. But anyway, we're just about finished now with this. I went ahead and added the stars. I think this is the final image. Yep. Yeah, so version 3. So you can tell that I did do a lot of re-editing on this target. But overall, I'm satisfied with how it came out. Let's see, I did use noise exterminator on this to kind of smooth out some of the graininess in the darker areas. Now, I've shared this picture on Astrobin, and I did 2 versions of it, and one version is basically a crop of this region, because this part of the shot came out really good. And again, my original goal was to kind of focus on the trapezium. I feel like maybe the contrast could be a little bit better here, but overall I'm quite happy with the details that we're seeing. Alright, so that's my video on processing the Orion Nebula with my data I collected from the Celestron Edge HD8, the 8-inch version. The camera I did use was a ZWO ASI 294 bin 2 setting, so the pixels are like 4.6 microns. Filters were the astronomic deep sky red, green, and blue filters. And as mentioned before, this was on a Skywatcher EQ6. Total integration time on this was 3 hours and 56 minutes. So again, really bright target. There's no reason to go 20 hours. Although I'd be lying if I wasn't tempted to get more data on this. Although it probably would have been a point of diminishing returns on this one. Okay, so if you've made it this far, I certainly would appreciate a like. If you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button and check out some of the other stuff on my channel. Drop a comment down there if you've got any thoughts on this image or thoughts on your own shots of M42, any questions. Are you having some trouble with M42? Maybe you can ask a question down there and I can respond to that and give you some guidance. And I hope everyone has a pleasant evening and clear skies.